morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Gary Chabot. I work with the state of New Hampshire in the Division of Economic Development, and I'm part of a larger organization called Department of Resources and Economic Development. And just so you know who we are and what we do, the Department of Resources and Economic Development has four major areas of agencies. The first is tourism, is a large group of ours. We also do state parks such as Cannon Mountain or Lake Sunapee and other state parks around the state. We also have resources such as natural resources such as the forest and lands. And then the division that I work for is called Economic Development. I'm one of 5 representatives around the state. I cover all of Hillsborough County and parts of Rockingham County, particularly the area up and down I-93, such as Salem, Derry, Londonderry, and Windham and Pelham. And then over into Hillsborough, I cover Manchester, Nashua, Milford, Amherst, and all parts of Hillsborough County going over to Peterborough. And my job is to work with businesses on all kinds of business issues such as workforce, marketing, including international trade, government contracting, those kinds of things. We also work in financing. We work in energy efficiency programs. We work in broadband programs. And we also work on programs. If you need assistance with any kind of a state agency that you don't know who to call, you can call me or one of my colleagues, and we will try to get you the right person that you want to match up with at any other state agency. We also get phone calls every day. People want to start a business, or they want to get a trade name, or they want information on how to do an LLC or a corporation, for example, and we will refer them to the Secretary of State's office for that information. So it's really a collection of business services of how to run your business, how to improve your business, how to hire people, how to train people, how to finance your business, and how to market your business. And that's really what we do. So my area is almost exclusively Hillsborough County, but I do go into 93, the Salem area, the Derry, obviously, Londonderry, Auburn, those kinds of towns in that area around Manchester, greater Manchester area. And what I do is I work with businesses on all kinds of things, and there are probably 3 or 4 major groupings that we work with. And I like to say that the major one that we work on is workforce. Anything to do with workforce is our main focus. That's probably 60% of what we do. And we also get involved in different types of marketing, such as international trade or government contracting. That's the second major group. The third major group gets into what I would call operational / administrative kinds of things, such as manufacturing processes, energy efficiencies, finance, and tax credits, which I'm going to talk about a lot about today. And then this fourth kind of fuzzy area is all other. For example, if you need an entree to a state agency, you don't know who to call, or you have a particular business question like getting a trade name, for example, or don't know how to do an LLC or that kind of thing. People will call our offices and try to figure out where to go. And my job is to help direct them to the right agency. Now, quite often I may not know exactly who to call, but somebody in our office does. So that happens a lot because obviously the state's a large organization, and through the years we collectively know almost everybody. So that's kind of a broad sense of the word. I guess the takeaway from that is anything you can think of in business that will help your business, call me and I'll try to find out the answer. And we also link up with the SBA. Here's Warren. And we also work with local banks, local real estate people, DOT, everybody. So that's what we do. I'm kind of think of me as a resource traffic cop. I can say, okay, you go here, whatever. That's what I do. So today's, I understand today's message really is to talk about tax credits and financing, alternative financing. Something to think about is where can I, if I'm a growing business, I want to know what the state resources are for money. And I'm here to tell you that the state doesn't have a checkbook to write out money. We don't have any money to lend or anything like that. That's the bank's job. Or in some cases, alternative lenders. And you're with a bank, right? Mm-hmm. What bank is that?
Citizens Bank.
Citizens. That's my bank. It's a good bank. By the way, and Warren I think will attest to this as well, that sometimes people call and say, where can I get my grant for a business? I want to start a business, I want my grant. I'm a minority-owned business, I'm a women-owned business, I'm a veteran, I'm a this, I'm a that, or whatever. And I want to find a grant to start my business. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I think Warren will back me up, there are no grants to start a business. That's the number one message. Although it's really unfortunate because a lot of people get that message that there are grants out there. And the reality is that there are not. However, we do have a grant. It's called the Job Training Grant Fund. And that particular grant is money that is available for training purposes. And that is money that you can apply for if you are if you pay any money into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, if you are an employer, and you pay into that. When you pay your paychecks out to your employees, a piece of that check goes out to the federal unemployment, and part of it goes to the state unemployment. That state unemployment is collected collectively across the state, and we have at any one point in time about $1 million to work with for training purposes. This particular grant is a grant that you can apply for. It's, you know, if you think about it, it's actually your money. It happens to be going to Concord, and it's sliced off for training purposes. You apply for it, and you can potentially get a grant for up to $100,000. And the minimum grant is $750. I do have a bit of literature about that. This particular grant is for what I would like to call incumbent employees. You have an employee, you want to train that person to do something over and above what they're currently doing, and maybe they need software training, they might need potentially English as a second language, they might potentially need a GED, they might need training on how to run a particular piece of equipment, maybe welding or something like that. It could be sales training, it could be management training, it could be office work type of training, anything like that. It's basically what I would call transferable skills. You have to think about it as this particular grant is not for the normal operating cost of doing business. For example, if you need to get a license and you want to be a plumber or an electrician and you have to get a license to do that, it won't pay for that because that's the basic cost of doing business, right? But the analogy I use, if you are say an electrician and you've already got your license, you got your basics taken care of, but now you want to send your people to do some training for how to install generators, and that's a special skill or a new skill that would probably be covered under this particular grant. So think of it, it's kind of enhanced learning, if you will, transferable, meaning that the employee can, once they move on from your company, they go to the next company or through their career development, they take that skill with them. This particular grant is open to all businesses. Like I say, if you pay into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, that's your #1 eligible criteria. We take applications once a month, usually about the the first Friday of the month is usually the cutoff date for the applications. And then around the third Friday of the month is when a committee in Concord looks at the applications, and you would actually be asked to come to Concord for about a 10 to 12 minute question and answer presentation, because they might have questions about your application. You would have basically who you are and what are you going to do the training, what kind of training is it, and a budget for the training, i.e. how much is the trainer going to cost, what are the materials, is there any software involved, that kind of thing. So there's a hard budget. And then the other criteria is that the community college system is the vendor or trainer of first choice. that's in the legislation for this particular grant, and they have to be consulted to see if they can do the training for you under this particular, on what you need. And quite often they do. I mean, welding comes to mind, for example, or management training or something of that nature. They would have a training course that you would obviously pay tuition for, and so on. In some cases, unique cases, I think the college actually may have somebody can come to your place because you might have the piece of machinery or something that's unique. So that can be arranged. However, they have to be the vendor of first choice. If they can't do it, they don't do it, timing's not right, or it's a unique training that only one person in the world from Oshkosh, Wisconsin has to come here to do it, they will waive their rights to do that, and then you're free to go out and hire that trainer. Like I said, it's up to $100,000, and you can apply. The forms are actually quite easy. They're name, address, phone number, stuff like that, and essentially a description of the training. I think the track record is about 95% of people who put an application in get at least some level of the grant that they're looking for. It is up to a 50% match, so be aware of that. So if your training is a $10,000 training program, in total, you would have to pay for at least up to $5,000 or more than $5,000 potentially, and the state would pick up the other $5,000. There is a 15-month window to use the funds, so you can approach it from a couple of different ways. One way people like to do it is, well, they never applied for a grant before, they really don't know what's involved, blah, blah, blah. They put in for a real easy one. Say, maybe $1,000, $1,200, $1,500, something like that. And they get their feet wet and they do that grant, and because they've got 15 months, they can work it maybe for the first couple of months, and then they finish it, they close out the grant, you pay the trainer, you pay the tuitions and all that, and then you submit for reimbursement. That's how it works. You pay up front, you get reimbursed. It's like an expense report, basically. That's how some people do it. Other people say, gosh, I'll look at the whole year's worth of training. I need this, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need different trainers. And they put together a whole package, and it adds up. In some cases, $70,000, $80,000 worth of training. They come in, they do the explanation, they get the grant. And some of the larger companies in the state have done just that. So that's kind of the number one found money, as it were, that people don't really know about. We try to get out and tell people it's on our website. I do have a flyer on that. All the applications are on there. All the grantees are on there, so it's public information who gets the grant. Another found money area that we get into is called there are two tax credit programs. One is called the Economic Revitalization Zone Tax Credit, ERZ, we refer to it as ERZ. And the second one is Research and Development Tax Credit. And let me talk about the Research and Development Tax Credit first. That's probably one of the more easier ones. If you are a company and you do any kind of research and development, and I don't know exactly what all you, maybe possibly Russ might potentially qualify for this, but mostly manufacturing companies that they make a product, they design a product, they spend money on research and development. If whatever you report to the federal government on your federal tax returns for research and development expenses, that's basically the amount that you would refer to on your state returns for this research and development tax credit. And it's up to $50,000 of a tax credit against your business profits tax and or your business enterprise tax. And it's collectively, any company in the state who does that is eligible to do that. Again, research and development oriented. Now, we have $1 million of tax credits available in the entire state, but as of this week, potentially, I believe it's been approved by both houses of the legislature. It's been approved, and I believe the governor's going to sign it this week. We're going to go from $1 million up to $2 million, so that it's a doubling in the size of of this particular tax credit. And frankly, that went through the cycle fairly quickly. I mean, she started working on this like in January, right? Day one, I think she was inaugurated, and the next day they were working on this, and so it's passed rather quickly. There's a lot of support for it, and it makes a lot of economic sense. So again, what you do is you apply online and put in your application, send in your tax returns, and it's actually through the Department of Revenue, actually, who administers this particular program. I do have a handout on that. Now, just so you know, like I said, the limit is up to $50,000, but because it is statewide and because a lot of people have applied for it, quite frankly, it's quite easy to get above the $1 million worth of application of what was the limit, or even potentially the $2 million now too. So instead of getting up to the $50,000, what they've done is they've actually taken all the applications and they prorate it essentially across the board equally, actually, as I'm led to believe. And everybody last year was about $12,000 to $14,000 worth of credit because there were so many people applying for it. So even though it's potentially, technically, I guess, available for 50, you don't get the 50 because there's so many people looking for it. So that's another area of found money. We have a lot of companies that I've worked with that do apply for it and do get it. The second tax credit is one that's more specific. It's called the Economic Revitalization Zone. It is statewide in the sense that it's in every part of the state, but you have to think of it as a real estate deal, basically. It has to be site specific, meaning that a town or city has to apply to us at DRED to designate an area within the town, such as a neighborhood, more likely an industrial park, or a street, or an area that they want vacant land, and they want to develop this over time into an economic, maybe it's somewhat depressed or distressed, maybe it's a brown field, and they want to turn it around. So the towns essentially select these pockets within the town to not really isolate, but to target, saying we want to incentivize that particular area. So they do that. It's all up to the town. It doesn't cost the town anything because it's simply designating an area. It actually, if in the long run, it would actually increase the tax base of the town to help your tax rate, because as you incentivize that particular area, a company moves in, they invest in the real estate, raising the assessed value of the property. So therefore, potentially over time, it would reduce your tax rate, if you think about it in that sense. In the state, there are 100 towns or cities that use it, and there are 150 zones. In Derry and Londonderry, there are 4 that I'm aware of. I think I have a list here. In Derry, and I'm speaking directly about Derry and Londonderry. If you're from another town, I'd have to check the list, but in Derry, there's a general area of downtown that's called an Economic Revitalization Zone, and then there's another area we call Route 28/Manchester Road. I'm not quite sure where that is, but I have maps actually here.
It's across from the church, St. Thomas.
Okay. And in Londonderry, there's Pettingill Road, which is up near the airport. There's about 1,000 acres up there that's primarily empty land, right at the end of the runway. And then Route 28/Jack Bridge Road/Page Road is also an economic revitalization zone. So that gives you kind of a sense of where, again, it's not every place. It may not be your property, but it could be potentially across the street, or vice versa. So the way this works is that a company moves in to that area, either takes an existing building that might be partially empty or has been empty or is underutilized, or it could be vacant land, or it could be a brownfield site, and you invest in the property, you buy the property, you build a building, fix up the building, and this is where it really gets sweetened up. is if you put in equipment into that site, so it's over and above the real estate value, if you meet a certain criteria of that investment, there are certain thresholds from a percentage point of view, which I won't get into with a lot of the details because it gets a little convoluted in the math. But you raise the bar of the property value, and you can use the equipment to add the value. You get that raised up, right? And then you add jobs into there. You add 1 job, 2 jobs, 10 jobs, 50 jobs, whatever. And by virtue of the salaries that are paid to those people, full-time jobs, by the way, they can't be part-timers. They have to be full-time jobs. We add all that up, and you come up with a tax credit by virtue of this spreadsheet that we've devised. And you may be eligible for up to a $200,000 tax credit. And the $200,000, which is maximum, is spread out over 5 years. So it can be maxed out at $40,000 per year. Last year, to give you an example, we had, I think, about 12 or 14 applicants across the state. And this year, I think it's about 12 to 14 again, roughly speaking. And we actually exceeded the state has $825,000 available for these tax credits. And we superseded that by a couple $100,000 last year, a couple $100,000 this year. So we actually do prorate that. So if you come in, let's say your application was $100,000 and we actually exceeded it, which we did, you might, instead of getting 100,000, you might get 90 something or whatever the percentage is. So a lot of areas of the state have taken advantage of that. A lot of towns don't even know about it yet. That's also part of our mission, to get out to the towns and help them through that process. That's basically found money, if you consider it. I mean, I can tell you, amazingly, there was a company in Nashua that moved into another office building. They actually moved across the street, literally, and they invested in their office space, and they added 12 new jobs. The average pay of the job, each job was, the average was about $130,000 for the pay, for the salary. And they just, they got about a $93,000 tax credit, which we calculated, say, on a Thursday, and on the previous Monday, you didn't even know about this program. So it was, you're talking about found money, I mean. And they're a rapidly growing company, and for them, that's saves them, a fair amount of investment capital. So it's that kind of thing. We really, this is part of why I get out and try to meet with people as much as I can to let them know that this particular program exists. We've also had companies, once they get into it and they're still growing, I have several clients like this. They apply year after year after year, so they actually have multiple tax credits working on it. So, because they're growing and they're investing, and this is what we want to do, right? So that's kind of the found money area of the state. Tax credits, the economic revitalization zone, which I have some handouts on that. The research and development tax credit, and the job training grant fund. Those are the biggies right there. Yes, any questions?
I think for what I do, commercial real estate, the ERZ program's been very helpful to me, and I am working with some people in downtown Derry, and I think what's really fascinating to me is that not only is the state offering money in this zone, but the town itself has a program for capping the tax rates in those same areas. So it really does help make it attractive for new businesses to come in, especially if they're going to be an owner user and they're going through like an SBA program where they can, maybe get a little break on their interest rates and working with the banks and so forth. So it's great to get the information out on those programs, and there are too many people out there looking for properties that have no idea that it exists, and I direct people to the DRED websites all the time. It's really helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another thing to bear in mind, just from a larger sense, excuse me, is that part of what we do, and I didn't really get into it too much, but we have 2 people in our office dedicated to recruitment of companies to come in from other places. It could be Massachusetts, it could be from Pennsylvania, it could be Canada. And when they meet with a client, the number one question quite often is, what does the state do for companies moving in? Where do I get my check? Or where, you know, what kind of programs does the state have to incentivize my company to move into your state versus going to, say, Georgia or South Carolina or Alabama? And so this is one of the programs that actually works for that, because it can say, well, you can move into this XYZ neighborhood, and by the way, there's a tax credit available for that particular zone, and it's part of the package or portfolio of incentives to help lure that company in from out of state. And frankly, the competition is immense. I mean, you know, to go to South Carolina, for example, I mean, frankly, they might be able to get free land or something in South Carolina, or tax abatements, or tax, you know, no taxes, or something like that, you know, in some parts of the country. So to compete with that is extremely difficult. And so this is just kind of a little bit of a sweetener of the pot to help these people decide. I will say the job training grants actually too, for, there was one company, and I won't name names, but they did recently move into the state or expand. It was actually a combination, it was a partnership kind of a deal. And one of the reasons they moved to New Hampshire was because of the job training grant fund. You know, because they got the training, they needed to train their people. And that really was the straw that helped move it forward. And you know, amongst other things, obviously, but the training was really the thing. So that, again, it's a program. We don't write checks, but we incentivize them through tax credits, and it's a great place to do business. The access to everybody in our state government is pretty good. I mean, you can, a phone call, get into the governor's office, for example, or one of our commissioners, and they'll call you back. I mean, we've had people, you know, tell us constantly, you know, I was from, you know, some other state, I called the governor's office, they didn't call me back, or I called this state office, I called that agency, never heard from them. They come into New Hampshire, we pick up the phone, we go directly into Mr. Clement, for example, and he calls back, or, you know, it happens. It's amazing. They're just blown away by that. So access is very critical. So that's just another thing, advantage for New Hampshire. So we talked about those. Those are basically state programs. We work with financing also. That was kind of that third or fourth bucket over here. And what we will tell people is we will primarily help them with resources of where they can get their money. We don't write the check, as I mentioned. We don't write their business plan, but we will refer them to SBA has a couple, I know that Warren will talk about that, but primarily SCORE is a group, SCORE, and that's a group of volunteers, of people who will help you with a business plan. They do training courses. I'm not going to try to steal your thunder.
No, I'm just here listening.
Okay. And another group that's kind of a sister organization to that is called the Small Business Development Center, SBDC. And again, they will sit down one-on-one, free. They will help you with a business plan. They'll help you with a cash flow plan. And they will help direct you to ascertain if your business plan has any merit and what kind of financing you might need. So the first line of defense really is to work with those resource providers, and Women's Business Center too. What's that called?
It's now referred to as the Center for Women's Business Advancement, I believe, and that they're located at SNU.
So all these agencies, groups I should say, will help you write the business plan. It's one-on-one, it's free. They might have some low-cost training programs.
Confidential.
Confidential, thank you. And I used to be with the SBDC for about 10 years, both New Hampshire and Vermont, so I've been there, done that. And it's a great group of people, very, very well qualified. So anyway, the whole first line of defense is to go to your regular bank, go to your conventional bank, sit down, outline your plan, go in prepared, make sure you have your act together, have your personal financial statement put together, your cash flow plans, your business plans, and your more or less your entity has to be put together as a sole proprietorship or an LLC or a corporation. And it just being more prepared going into a bank, and I'm sure you can speak to this, is that the better prepared you are, the more credibility you're going to have. And if you can demonstrate that you really know what you're doing, and you got a good team of people around you. So that technical assistance piece through the Women's Business Center, and I'm going to refer to it as Women's Business Center because that's easier for me to say, and SBDC and SCORE, that's really, in my opinion, is probably the best place to go. And then put the package together, go to a bank. And where Laurel Bistonay was going to be here today, she's with the Regional Economic Development Corporation out of Exeter. She covers essentially Seacoast area west to Derry, Londonderry, and I think she goes into Hudson a little bit to the Merrimack River, and even parts of Merrimack, I think, as well. Anyway, what Laurel was going to talk about was alternative financing. And so what happens is you go to your conventional bank and they say, and let's say your need is $200,000 and you've got all the business plan put together in the whole 9 yards. But the bank says, well, based upon your analysis, credit, loan coverage ratios, all these kinds of things, balance sheet types of analysis, we'll go up to $160,000 and you need 200. So I call that a gap. So where are you gonna get that gap? And so you have a variety of areas that you have to look at. One is, and we told people this all the time, family and friends and others. There's another word but I won't say it. Family, friends, and others. Try to get that money from those. If they don't have it, can't get it, then you might be eligible for alternative lending.
Sorry.
And alternative lending can be done through these regional economic development groups around the state. I think there are 12 agencies around the state who cover different parts of the state. Laurel happens to be this one in this area. And she primarily deals with what we call revolving loan funds, revolving RLF, revolving loan fund. And so when you have this gap, you would go, again, you will have worked with your conventional bank. Now you go to Laurel, and she will probably be able to do, if assuming credit's good, cash flow looks good, management's good, etc., she may be able to do a gap financing of this particular piece that's missing. And that would be a revolving loan fund. And usually what happens is, or I probably should say always happens, is the bank will take a first position on the real estate or the equipment, etc. And then Laurel will be able to take a second position on the real estate and or the equipment. And so that's really what it is. And quite frankly, they're not a bank, so there are a lot of flexibilities in the terms, the payments. It might be interest only. It could be a length of amortization with a 5-year balloon, something like that. There's a whole bunch of ways to fix it and make your cash flow work for you. So she has some level of flexibility to do that. So that's called a revolving loan fund. And that's really about it. I mean, there are some other programs there are programs in, like the Business Finance Authority has some energy loans that might be available for putting new equipment that might be energy efficient. There's some loans potentially through them. United States Department of Agriculture has some potential loans or loan guarantees maybe for energy efficiency. And my last piece is, and I'm going to hand it off. I think maybe Warren can speak to some of your no. You're just here as an
Yeah, I'm just here to listen, but I can, you know, if anybody has questions, I'm certainly willing to answer them,
okay,
or attempt to answer them.
Yeah, there is another program out of Concord. It's called Vested for Growth. And Vested for Growth is another alternative lender. They are a not-for-profit. They're basically a program of the Community Loan Fund, which is they're primarily into housing and child care and also residential housing for mobile home parks, a lot of it. But they also have this economic development piece, which is Vested for Growth. And years ago, you may have heard of the word microcredit. Microcredit was an organization that was through the Community Loan Fund. And their program was primarily group lending. So you might be in a small group like this where everybody got together once a month and they were all individual businesses. They'd come to like a support group, I would call it. But they also did peer lending. They would have these monies available, and let's say Russ had a business plan and he needed $5,000 to buy a piece of equipment, and he'd put together his business plan and present it to the group, and they would vote on it, whether or not you actually would get the loan. And then you would pay it back, and through the next X number of months over the years, the group would help Russ with his business plan to make sure he's paying back the $5,000, right? And in the meantime, you might need some money to maybe want to buy again, another piece of equipment or something like that. And it was peer lending. The unfortunate part of it is that microcredit doesn't exist anymore. But Vested for Growth still does some level of lending for the really small businesses who might need the $2,000 or $1,000 or whatever. The catch is that you have to be in business for a year, and you also have to have done a real federal tax return for a year. So think about it, a minimum 15 to 18 months worth of being in business before you can go to them. But I'm only mentioning it because they do some small business lending. But where Vested for Growth really makes their mark is they have a program called royalty financing. And royalty financing is such that you're on a growth, say you've been in business, you have a great product, and you're growing and you're selling the product. You have contracts and orders for the product, but you need some working capital, or maybe you again want to buy a piece of equipment. What Vested for Growth will do is they'll lend you money, and it's not what you would consider a monthly payment plan, like a mortgage payment or something, or a car payment. What they will do is they will actually get paid back their loan based upon your sales revenue. So it's a percentage of sales as opposed to a monthly payment. So if you have a great month, you pay a percentage of sales. If you have a bad month, you may or may not have a percentage of sales. So it's flexible in that sense. And so it's based on the performance of the sales level primarily. So they have some flexibility there to write the terms. Their sweet spot is in the $200,000, $300,000 range or so. And I don't think they go any higher than, I'm thinking not even any higher than 400,000 or so. But, so that's another alternative plan. They're very selective. I will say that I have seen some companies get them in Southern Hampshire, but they look at a lot of deals and they are selective. But I can tell you that I know of a company in Londonderry that got a loan through them. So that's just really it in the final analysis. Plans, go to your conventional bank first. Be prepared. Get your technical assistance from SCORE or SBDC or the Women's Business Group there, and go to your bank. Again, the gap is where you would talk to the regional economic development corporations, again through Laurel in this particular case. So thank you again. Again, my name is Gary Chabot with the Department of Resources and Economic Development. So with that, I think I'd like to invite Warren to speak to maybe some of the SBA, if you're up to it.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Warren Haggerty, and I work for the U.S. Small Business Administration located in Concord, New Hampshire. And our primary function is to work with small business owners throughout the state, and really all business owners throughout the state, and assist them in various ways that we can help them with their small businesses, with financing, with government contracting aspects, as well as with resource partners that we have that work directly with them and helping them in counseling ways. They can, the organizations we have are the Women's Small Business Center, the Women's Business Center, which actually their new title is the Center for Women's Advancement. We also have SCORE, and we also have the Small Business Development Center. These are all counselors that do free one-on-one confidential counseling, and they work with the small businesses as much or as little as they want. We currently have 8 employees at the Small Business Administration, and we cover the entire state, everywhere from the Massachusetts border all the way up to the northern part of the state. And I will say, like Gary said, is we get a lot of calls from individuals that are calling to ask about getting grants or asking us about what the process is in getting money from us. And the first thing we try to explain is that we don't make loans directly. They're done through lenders in the state that we partner with in a form of basically co-signing is sort of what it amounts to, equivalent to. So an individual business would go to a lender of their choosing and they would apply for a business loan. The entire credit decision rests in the hands of the lender. They're going to make the decision based on obviously all your information that you're providing to them. At that point, they're going to decide that they want to make the loan, and at that point they have the option, they being a lender, has the option of asking the SBA to partner with them in guaranteeing the loan. So we have many different programs, two primary ones. One is called the 7A program, which is pretty much an umbrella program that covers a lot of variations in loans. And I have a lot of information I did bring if anybody cares to have it. I have that in a resource guide I brought also. Happy to share with all of you. So there's that kind of program, and like I said, there's several sub-programs that fall under that. And then we have what's called the 504 program that is more for buying a large piece of equipment, a piece of property, things like that. And that is kind of done through a lender, the SBA, and then an economic development organization, which there are about 4 of them here in the state that work in that grouping. And basically what they do is, excuse me, the bank would have a certain percentage of it. The owner would be expected to be roughly putting in about 10% of the overall cost of the project if they were buying a building, for example. And then the lender, SBA, and these economic development corporations would be involved in the other pieces of it. So that's kind of that program, just very broadly stated. Like I said, we have various programs. They loan up to, in some cases, can go up to $5 million, for example, if it's for a manufacturer, something like that, depending upon what the need is. Loans, I've seen loans as low as $5,000. I would guess probably the average loan these days are probably somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000, roughly. Like I said, we see them, you know, $5,000, $10,000. Not too many $5,000, obviously. That's kind of little money, but they do happen. You know, you see them 10, 25, you know, up to $1 million and more in some cases. In the 7A program, there's a maximum, and I have a whole, I think I brought it with me, that kind of gives you a breakdown of what those programs are, kind of the maximum amounts available, and it kind of explains it a little bit in a kind of a little sort of a spreadsheet type layout, so I have those with me as well. As well as I have a listing of all the lenders that we deal with, and we really do have a great relationship with virtually all the lenders in the state. I'm sure there are some that we don't touch, but we do have a relationship with virtually all the banks and credit unions and things that we do work with. So again, the SBA, really the 4 things that the SBA does is we do that. That's kind of the financial piece of it. We have an individual in our office that works very closely with the lenders, making sure, meets with them, gives them all various trainings, things like that, makes sure they're aware of all the new programs that are coming out. Our headquarters office are constantly looking at how they can provide programs that are going to be best used by the small business owners out there, and they've got a kind of a new program they're pushing. It's a small loan program that's got very easy on the paperwork piece of it for the small business, and more so for the lender. So it's much easier for them to get the guarantee and stuff like that. It's less cumbersome. So that's sort of a new program we're really trying to push out there to help the lenders really and the small business person. The other thing we get very much involved in is we have our resource partners. As Gary mentioned, there's 3 different organizations that we work with very closely. And again, it's just SCORE, the Small Business Development Center, and the Women's Business Center, or the Center for Women's Advancement. If you have any kind of needs, any kind of questions, anything comes up, you have questions about marketing, you have questions about you know, staffing, anything like that. These are really great resources, if nothing else, just to kind of bounce your ideas off of. There's absolutely no charge. It's 100% free. You'll be assigned a counselor that'll work directly with you, and they will work with you as much or as little as you want them to. It's really at your needs. There's no, if you're going there to, and this is also for startups too. We send a lot of startup businesses to these organizations. And it's really advantageous for them because they can make sure they have their entire package together if and when it comes time to go to a lender. They're really going to partner with them and really help them get all that stuff so they go in there and they're fully prepared. That being said, they do have to be credit worthy. That is the primary thing, and obviously over the past few years with the economic situation as it's been, there's a lot of people that have businesses, but for various reasons and obviously a lot of times no fault to them, you know, their credit may not be in great shape in some cases, and so sometimes they can't get loans regardless how good they are at that point in time because just their situation is, you know, been that. Doesn't mean it can't get better over time, and that's sort of where SBA comes in some cases. We're kind of that tipping point in making the loan go forward where it may not normally. Sometimes there may be lack of collateral available to support a loan, and that's again where SBA may be able to come in. Excuse me. The other thing we do is we get involved with government contracting quite a lot. We have an individual that works very much one-on-one with small businesses. Also helping people get qualified. There's several programs that SBA has and the state that we work with, the PTAP, it's called Procurement Technical Assistance Program, very closely. And their primary function is to work with small businesses who want to get involved in any kind of government contracting, whether it be at the local level, state level, federal level. They're a fabulous, fabulous resource. The folks up there are just unbelievably good at what they do. There are some, I'll just give you an idea, there are some programs that SBA has, certification type programs, that in some cases, there's one's called a hub zone area certification that people can get certified through. There's a whole process that you have to go through, and that's through SBA. There's also a women's business or a disadvantaged women's business owned certification that they can get and there's a portal online where actually they can put all their information up there, and so when they get certified as a women-owned business or economically disadvantaged women-owned business. Those two programs are specifically for women-owned businesses, obviously. And what that gives them is a little bit of a leg up if they're, and it's really based on all government contracting situations, the hub zone, these women's certifications. There's also another one called the 8A, which is primarily for minorities, although women and other, based on their circumstances, can get certified as an 8A program. And again, it helps when they're doing subcontracting through these big primes that get these large monster contracts through the government, or actually they can get sole source contracts through the government if they're fortunate enough to be a 8A certified company. Like I said, we have some women that own businesses in the state that have been certified as 8As, and there are minority organizations. I think we have a very small portfolio. I think we have like 8 or 9 currently that are 8A certified in the state of New Hampshire. Some of your other states have hundreds, in some cases even thousands. Some in New York, obviously, California, places like that, especially where there's a large minority group. Because what happens is there's certain groups that are automatically qualified, and they have to meet certain criteria, obviously, to fit in that mode, but they're recognized disadvantaged groups. The other thing we get involved in that most people don't realize is when there's disaster, and national disasters declared. SBA is the organization that comes in behind FEMA. We don't do direct funding at all, where FEMA would come in and help you if your business is or yourself, you lose your home, there's such damage done to your home, you can't live in it, whatever the case may be. Obviously, you always hear about FEMA coming and help people getting in housing, things like that. SBA is actually the organization that comes in behind them and does the evaluation on the damage and that type of thing. And we're actually the ones that write the low interest checks, basically, to rebuild a home, to, you know, to buy a home in some cases if it has to be. So we're that organization that actually does that, and we come in and do the evaluation on the damage and all that. So there's various levels. There are going to be state disasters, there are going to be federal disasters declared, and obviously if a federal disaster is declared, then that's where SBA would come in. There are some other circumstances where we would come in a disaster relief type situation, but so that's kind of just a real broad overview of what the SBA does. Like I said, I have several different brochures I brought that I certainly have available, and we'll be happy to share with anybody that's interested in it. If there's any other specific questions I can answer for anybody, I have my business card here actually that I can pass around if you want. And if you have any kind of questions at all of any type related to small businesses, you know, please feel free to give me a call, or and I can point you in the right direction. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share this information, and I hope it's useful. Again, my name is Warren Haggerty with the Small Business Administration, and my number if you need to contact us, the number for the office if you need to contact us, is 603-225-1400. Thank you again.